Shalom Mishpacha. Hello family. How is everyone doing? This is Rabbi Esther from a small sanctuary, and I'm just jumping on real quick to give you some good thinking material for Elul. We are now currently in the month of Elul, which is the preparatory month for the high holidays, when we start turning our hearts inward, engaging in introspection, engaging in more mitzvot, maybe giving more tzedakah, maybe developing a prayer life, maybe contemplating the place of Judaism in our lives, or the place of heeding our ethical calling to become better human beings. Whatever it may be that you turn your heart to this Elul, I am here to give you a resource. One of the challenges of the high holidays for contemporary audiences is the God language. People really struggle with the God language around the high holidays. And there are a few reasons for that. It's just the intensity and the length and the complexity of the services, the liturgy, and the theology is very overwhelming, especially if synagogue going and accessing the Siddur is not a weekly practice for you. You come to the services and it kind of hits you like a ton of bricks. What am I supposed to do with all of this God stuff? Do I even really believe in God? And apart from that, how am I supposed to understand this? Either from a philosophical perspective, or a literary perspective, or a historical perspective, let alone a personal perspective. So that is what we're going to talk about real quick today. And the book I want to recommend to guide our discussion is this very amazing book called Thinking About God, Jewish Views by Rabbi Kari Tuling. Rabbi Tuling is a mentor and a friend of mine, so I'm really excited to recommend this book in any case. But the reason I'm recommending this book is because it helps you figure out where you might want to position yourself in terms of God. This book will take you on a journey to figure out what Jews have believed about the nature of God, the nature of the divine, throughout the ages, right up to and including the modern era. And this is a framework that I want to give you to think about God in a really kind of interesting and new way that is not reductionist and not self-limiting. The metaphor I use is to think about God three-dimensionally. Often when we talk about God, we tend to think about belief or philosophy or theology in very binary ways, black or white. You either believe or you don't believe. You either affirm or you don't affirm. But in reality, that's not how the human mind works, and that is not how life works. So the model I want to give to you for thinking about God is three-dimensional. You can plot your relationship with the divine among multiple axes so that you can build a more integrative model, a more complete and nuanced model for thinking about God. If that sounds abstract, we're going to make it concrete right now. For instance, imagine axis number one. Axis number one may be what you think scientifically about God. Do you think there's any evidence for a supreme being or a creative organizing principle in the universe? How does science inform your ideas about the divine? Axis number two is what you think theologically or philosophically about God. If you contemplate God as a philosophical concept in relatively abstract terms, then what is the model that you come up with that feels compelling to you? Axis number three is what you know experientially about God, i.e., what place does the divine encounter have in your life? Have you felt God's presence? Do you foster a relationship with the divine or a sense of the divine, whether that be through nature, prayer, study, contemplation, or anything else? You could expand these axes and add many other things, like where you are coming from traditionally, what your family culture has given you, where you find yourself denominationally, Jewishly as well. But that is up to each of you. I want to talk you through the three axes and how this book can help you uncover a more integrative, holistic view of the divine in your life. Now, why am I proposing this? because it's actually really normal to see theology and personal belief, or lack thereof, on a continuum. If we can break the binary and say, actually, in some cases I relate to God in this way, in other cases I relate to God in that way, you are giving yourself more space and more grace for a more realistic and livable and compelling way to integrate the divine into your own life. Because you do not have to abdicate the principles that you hold precious and close to your heart, whether they're scientific, philosophical, or theological. Let's take myself as an example. Axis 1, scientifically, I am an agnostic. Agnosticism being the branch of thought that says that ultimately we cannot prove the existence of the divine. We cannot know or not know whether God exists. So it is an open-ended question. Scientifically, I think this is true. I don't think we can prove the existence of God, nor do I have a particular scientific impetus to want to do so. Because my belief in God is much less about how the physical universe operates and more about why I live my life. So, I am an agnostic on a certain level. This might shock people, but stay with me. Do I think science should endeavor to prove the existence of God? No. And I actually think it's quite futile and leads to a God of the gaps. See my video about religious liberalism and fundamentalism to find out what I mean by God of the gaps. Because it just pushes us further back, placing the burden of proof on us theists to prove that God exists scientifically. And at the end of the day, I think it's a futile exercise and also a spiritually irrelevant exercise, because part of the beauty of faith is that it's faith. And I certainly wouldn't want to sully the integrity and independence of the scientific process by making it look for God. Alright, so that's axis 1. Axis number 2, philosophically. My philosophy is that I am a monist panentheist. What is panentheism? Panentheism is a similar doctrine to pantheism. Pantheism equates God with the knowable, observable physical universe. I do that too, but the N in panentheism also acknowledges that God has a transcendent quality that goes beyond the knowable or observable universe. So I do believe that the universe is divine, but I also believe that the divine is more than the universe. However, this philosophical posture of me believing the universe is divine deeply informs my ethics and spirituality. It informs how I view nature and our place in it. It informs how I see creation, deep ecology, and things like that. At the end of the day, I want to abide by philosophy that sees every blade of grass and every atom and every molecule and every cell of our being as being animated with the divine force. So that is axis number 2. Axis number 3, in my case, is that experientially, I am a theist, a classical theist. I believe that God is an intelligence and an entity with a will and a boundless capacity to love. Like axis 1, I don't have any proof for it. Like axis 2, I don't need to believe that in order to imbue the universe with divine meaning. But axis number 3 is part of my lived experience of seeking out the divine in my life. I pray, I have a sacred practice, I commune with the divine, I talk to God, and I feel that in God's own way, through the filters of my limited understanding, God speaks to my heart. So, this may seem contradictory. How can I, on the one hand, affirm quite a classical, traditional belief in God, that God loves me, and God cares about me, and God desires to be in a relationship with me, but also say I'm an agnostic? That seems strange, right? It does, if you want to hold on to a binary understanding of theology. But I actually think this is a much healthier place to be. I have moments where I doubt the existence of God. I have moments where I feel agnostic or even atheist, where I'm like, well, maybe God doesn't exist, and I'm wrong about the existence of God. And then I check with myself and I think, well, even if I am wrong about the existence of God, the Jewish path to divinity and holiness is so beautiful to me that it is almost inconsequential whether God exists at the end of it, because mitzvah goreret mitzvah. The mitzvah is its own reward and will generate more mitzvot. For me, Judaism is compelling with or without the God idea. Personally, I feel drawn to the God idea, and it is a big animating force in my Jewish life. But not all the time, and that is not for everyone. On the other hand, my agnosticism allows me to take a healthy posture of skepticism and critical inquiry vis-a-vis the world. My theism allows me to fall in love with God, to have a devotional practice, to say, I want to worship God. I want to align myself with the divine will as I understand it, through the classical sources of the tradition, through the voices that speak to us across the generations, and through my own personal lived experience, where I center myself in prayer and feel God's loving embrace of my soul. So how does this book figure into this approach? This book has all kinds of chapters on Jewish views. Part 1 is God the creator and source of all being, including evil. It takes rabbinic views and biblical views and medieval views and modern views. Part 2. Does God have a personality, or is God an impersonal force? Again, it goes throughout the views of Jewish history to try and find meaningful insights into this question. It asks, is God a person? Does God have a gender? What does it mean to declare God is one? Part 3. Does God redeem, or might God not redeem? I.e., what is God's role in human history? Part 4. Is God a covenantal partner and lawgiver, or might these roles be rethought in the modern age? What this book allows you to do is to examine these different ways into the concepts and ideas of God that Judaism has postulated. And I think it's really important to understand that just like we as individuals have these axes, a pluralist theology or many theologies, we all contain multitudes, the same applies to the Jewish tradition writ large. So that when you encounter the machzor, you don't see the High Holiday Prayer Book just as one fixed approach. The machzor speaks with many voices, as our tradition always has. And it is an invitation for you to align yourself with the voice that feels most compelling to you at this point in your life. And to recognize that those voices will shift. We can move along the spectrum. We can inhabit different points on the axis. And that is healthy and liberating. There's obviously a lot more to say about this, but how does this 3D theology work out in practice when you are sitting in synagogue looking at the machzor and you have so many questions? I think one of the things to keep in mind is that you are allowed to be in relationship with the text, including rejecting it, amending it, or rewriting it in your brain, or affirming it. When you see God as the one who inscribes of the book of life, how does that make you feel? When you see God deciding life or death, is that a premise you want to reject? By creating a little bit of contemplative distance between yourself and the ideas of the machzor, you can reduce some of the triggers that may bring up a lot of emotions for people who read the machzor and pray from the machzor. This is your journey to take charge of. And whatever life experiences you have had that inform your particular reaction to the high holidays, the machzor, or the concept of God, those reactions and experiences are valid. It is not up to anyone else to validate or invalidate what you know to be true in your own heart. This is about giving you the tools to deepen your connection on your terms. I hope that on your high holiday journey, when you encounter the powerful and difficult ideas of the machzor, that this is a good resource for you, and that the three-dimensional theological model that I have proposed may give you a sense of calmness and empowerment about where you want to find yourself religiously. May your search for the divine, however you understand that, continue to nourish you, to give you joy, to bring you closer to yourself, to your own great moral calling, to Judaism writ large, and to the great web of life. Thank you for following me along. Please feel free to leave any comment, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. And then I will see you for the next episode of A Small Sanctuary. Shalom uvracha, with peace and blessing from my bait to your bait. Bye.